advised that the views and opinions of the hosts and guests do not reflect those of the station.
First time in India?
नहीं, दूसरी बार.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Philippines Uncut. I am your host, Buddy Cunanan. Now, in this show, we talk about everything under the sun. And tonight, we're going to be talking about India, one of the most amazing countries in the world. It is a country of almost 1.5 billion people. It is the world's largest democracy and host to a multitude of religions, cultures, traditions, sights and sounds, and almost every color of the rainbow. And joining us now to talk about India and everything that makes it incredible India is none other than the Ambassador of India to the Philippines, His Excellency, Ambassador Amit Dasgupta. Good evening, Mr. Ambassador, and welcome to Philippines Uncut.
Thank you, buddy. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, sir. You know, sir, it really is a pleasure and an honor to have you here because featuring India is a very special experience because I can say with 100% certainty that I love your country. It's truly amazing, and I've really fallen in love with it, and I've had the opportunity to visit several times. So it's really a very amazing place, sir.
I'm honored and delighted to know this, buddy, and I do hope we keep going back
Absolutely,
more frequently.
Sir. And hopefully through this interview, we can encourage other Filipinos to visit your beautiful country.
Keep my fingers crossed.
Yes, sir. Now, sir, let's talk about you. What is your background, Excellency?
Well, I studied sociology in Delhi. And then joined the diplomatic service in 1979. So done about 34 years. I don't know if I'm a good diplomat or a bad diplomat, but, well, I've been there for 34 years. and traveled around a bit as part of my work. Started off with Egypt. So I was in Cairo, and then went from there. I went to Brussels. I was in Kathmandu, in Berlin, and just before coming here, I was in Sydney, and in between in Delhi.
Yes, sir. Very interesting posts.
Very nice, very nice.
Yes.
Unfortunately, left out quite a bit of Africa, Latin America, China, but next life.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now, I understand, sir, that aside from being a diplomat, you're also an author and an accomplished writer. Tell us about your work.
Well, I try to write. Have a couple of books. Most of my books have actually been about India. One which did quite well was on something to do with trade policy, but I'm now looking at stuff which delves into, if you like, to put it in a very brief manner, why we do what we do. So that's the theme. And a fiction title has just come out called The Lost Fragrance, and working on a non-fiction title which will explore the theme a little bit more. So as you grow older, I suppose these are the questions that bother you.
Yes, sir. Well, sir, I hope that your books can be available locally, so at least we here in the Philippines can have a chance to read them.
Oh, I'd love them to be available here. I have to find out the procedures that have to be followed. But yeah, I mean, it's always a great thing for an author to see his or her book on in a bookshop, and it's a great feeling.
Yes, sir. Now, sir, let's talk about your country. Incredible India. Describe it briefly. Why is it incredible?
Well, I think the most incredible, if you like, fascinating thing about India is its diversity. You know, north to south, east to west, everything changes. You know, the cuisine changes, the clothes change, the language and the dialects change, even the gods we worship changes. You know, so, and that's the fascinating part of it. Of course, what happens in the projection of India is that in many places, I mean, when they talk of Indian food, for example, they don't know the variety of Indian food, so they know certain curries. And so it's incredible because when you visit, you realize the extraordinary diversity, including in music.
Yes.
You know, it just shifts and changes, and it's all wonderful. The landscape changes. So you have the desert, you have snow-capped Himalayan mountains, you have beaches, you have mountains, you have lots of people. That's another big thing.
Lots and lots of people, sir.
Lots and lots of people.
Yes, sir. And yes, so like even you, sir, as an Indian, when you travel around India, does everyone speak one language, like Hindi? Or I mean, I understand there are many different dialects, but is there one national language that sort of unites the entire subcontinent?
Well, I think Hindi is understood by a lot of people, as indeed is English. So I think it's possible to actually travel around being familiar with both these languages and not having a problem. I mean, English is really a common denominator in many parts of India. And I don't think you're ever at a loss for words. If you were to lose your way, it's possibly because a person doesn't know where to direct you and not because a person hasn't understood what you're asking. So I think, yeah, I think I'd put it as English and Hindi as close parallels.
Yes, sir. And you mentioned that really the diversity of religions, languages, even, as you said, the gods that the people worship differ from north to south. How then would you characterize the concept of Indian nationhood? When usually when we talk about a nation, there's something that binds them together, maybe common religion, common language, common culture. But in this case, in India, every state is, as you said, Excellency, very different. How is it now that India's come together to become this one big, great nation? And the world's biggest democracy.
Yeah, you know, one way I describe India is, you know, one of my first books was called The Divine Peacock. And I like the metaphor of the peacock, you know. I mean, if you look at a peacock's feather, it has many different colors. But you can't separate one color from the other. But there are many different colors. And it's almost as if a color weaves itself into the other. I think India's diversity is like that. That diversity doesn't create a conflict. There may be tensions on occasion, but there is no conflict which is divisive. And it's allowing this plurality, which in my view defines India. That, to me, is the idea of India. diversity, plurality, you know.
Unity in diversity.
That's right.
Yes.
A kind of continuity and change going together, you know, the traditional and the modern, you know. So, and we don't see them as opposites. We see them as part of being together.
Yes, sir.
It's like having the grandfather in your house and the grandchild.
Yes, sir.
They're not in conflict. You
Yes,
know,
sir.
it's what you get a totality with.
Yes, sir. And when we talk about democracies, when you think about 1.3 billion people, you know, it's a democratic country, representative country, and you think about how even carrying things out like the elections. How does one carry an election out for 1.3 billion people? That's a massive undertaking.
Yeah, I think that's something which fascinates Indians as well, because there was this incredible program I saw where an election officer had to travel several miles for only one person to cast his vote. And we are fiercely loyal to democracy. I mean, democracy is what defines us. And I think that is a non-negotiable belief that we have, on which India is built. It cannot abandon democracy, because if it does, it abandons its soul. And so we guard it, and we nurture it, and we are proud of it. So, yeah, I mean, I think even for Indians to think that when we have our elections, within a couple of days, we're able to announce results. My last posting was in Australia. And I still remember that in Australia, for example, voting is compulsory. And in India, around the same time, we had our elections as well. And the total number of people who voted for the elections was over 10 times the entire population of Australia. Voting for us is voluntary. It is not compulsory. And our results were out much faster. And we have this electronic voting machine with which we declare results.
Yes.
And of course you can contest the result if you want to. But it's now so good, this EVM as we call it, that we're very proud of it. We take it around. The Afghanistan elections had used it as well. So yeah, we are carrying out improvements,
yes, sir,
in the manner in which we administer democracy. Democracy is not just a principle. Democracy has to be lived.
Absolutely.
You know.
Absolutely. And you know, as you know, sir, here in the Philippines, we're going to have our elections in a couple of months, and I wish we could take pointers from how it's done in India, because I think you guys have really perfected it almost to a high degree of acceptability and credibility. And as I said, successful elections in India is no joke, because 1.3 billion people, to get that mandate is amazing.
It is. And I think, you know, we have enough to, lots and lots that India and Philippines can learn from one another,
yes,
share with one another.
Yes, sir.
I don't think we should reinvent the wheel. And we have, when we look at the Philippines, we see your fiercely loyal, I mean, the powerful press that you have. That's extraordinary. The people over here, their levels of education literacy are very high. The level of knowledge is very high. And I think the level of debate is also very, very high. So when you combine all this together, that's when you have a democratic polity. So I'm delighted to come from a democratic country like India to a democracy like Philippines.
Actually, sir, when you're describing the Philippines, I could almost imagine you describing India, because it sounds like almost exactly like India.
Thank you.
A high level of empowerment, and one area which is really admirable in India is the empowerment of the people when it comes to freedom of information.
Yes.
Like I understand in India, I understand from my colleagues who've been there and we've talked about it, that an individual can demand information from the government, and within 30 days or something like that, the government official must produce it. You know, I mean, that kind of empowerment, that people can get information, can get access to their government, is something that I think is very admirable as well.
You know, it's punishable by law.
Yes, sir.
If I don't respond, and it's called the Right to Information
Yes,
Act.
right to information. Yes.
And so we have designated people who to whom the questions come. They
Yes,
may
sir.
come, you know, in an anonymous manner to the entire embassy, but there will be people tasked to deal with that. And there is no question of shirking it and saying that, you know, I don't have it or whatever it is,
Yes.
but you jolly well produce it.
Yes.
And we have now fine-tuned this. And where the questions relate to, let's say, integrity, financial integrity, there we made the laws even tougher. And so this allows for transparency. I think, you know, one element, if you like, of democracy is transparency.
Yeah, absolutely.
And transparency has to be visible. You
Yes.
should be able to see transparency, you know.
Yes, sir, absolutely. It sounds redundant when you say
Yeah.
you have the sea transfer, but absolutely, absolutely correct. And what's nice about India is that the systems are in place, because one can talk about transparency and accountability, but if the systems aren't in place to make these things possible, then it will not work.
Yeah, I agree with you. But at the same time, I think in India also we're working at it. Numbers
Yes, sir.
are large, and it's not that everything we want to do ideally we are able to achieve, but you know, it's a work in progress. We're working
Yes.
hard. We'll get there.
Yes, sir. Now, let's talk about, sir, India as a tourist destination, because our viewers were treated to a 3-minute video, and ordinarily I don't show a video that long for my opening billboard, but I said, I love that video. It really struck a chord in me, and I said I have to share it with the viewers. Let's talk about tourist attractions in India. What would be, you, sir, for you, what would be the top attractions?
My case, you know, I mean, I like tigers. So, I mean, for me, I do a lot of wildlife is what I like.
Nice.
Nature is what I like. But you know, I mean, everyone who goes to India for the first time says the Taj Mahal. And I still remember when I saw the Taj Mahal for the umpteenth time, the last time a couple of years ago, it was still as if it was the first time. It is a magnificent piece of architecture, of beauty, a dedication to love. But I mean, my feet would always take me to a wildlife park, much quicker, if you like, than to ancient cultural heritages. And I mean, India is full of it, you know. I mean, it's an old civilization with young people. And so there are lots of great things to see and to do. Music is great. The festivals are fantastic. The temples, the churches, the mosques, they're all superb. They are very good places of great natural beauty, which are mesmerizing. I mean, to look at a tiger, or not to see the tiger, but just to smell him, it's an uncanny feeling. Your hair will stand up.
Wow.
And it's a great feeling.
I've never seen tigers in the wild, Excellency. I've always seen them in a zoo or in a reserve, but never in the wild. I understand your reservations are quite expansive. They're quite huge.
Yes, they are.
Corbett
Because, you know,
National Park.
Yeah,
and,
And Corbett National Park, as you know, that the man after whom it's named was the famous English hunter. Not really a hunter, but he did hunt. He used to hunt man-eating tigers and leopards, Jim Corbett, and wrote a brilliant book called My India, which, you know, many of us grew up with. Tigers have very large territories. And so while it's great to say that, look, I need 10 tigers in this territory, 10 may be just too much. So tiger territory is always very, very long, like elephants. And they travel a lot. They may come back to the same place. Therefore, our reserves are very large. At the same time, you know, there is one country which wants tiger parts. And so there's a lot of poaching that's going on. Which is sad because the number of tigers has come down.
Yes.
I hope it doesn't go extinct, and that we are, you know, confined to watching it on a film or in the zoo. Tiger in the wild is a completely different thing. Any animal in the wild is beautiful.
Yes, sir. Now, sir, for viewers watching us now and you know, deciding we're on the eve of summer almost, the Philippine summer, when people are starting to plan their vacations and holidays, what would set India apart, let's say, from other destinations? Why go to India? What would
I mean, as you're coming into summer, let's look at the season. If you're talking about traveling to India now, there are many parts of India which are going to start getting hot and hotter. And that's not a very comfortable thing to do. You don't want to stay in a hotel because each hotel is as good as the other. Some may be slightly better, but you really don't travel large distances to get inside a hotel. But let me come back to wildlife. This is the right time for wildlife because the animal has to come out to a watering hole. So when the weather is terrible for the tourist, it's the ideal time for the photographer because all you do is sit near a watering hole and you'll see wild boar, bison, bears, elephants, tigers, cheetahs, leopards. They all come across over there, and that's when you can photograph them. But apart from that, India, you go up north. You go to the Himalayan range, and that's something which is quite extraordinary and really out of this world.
Of course.
See, yeah, and as the seasons change, you pick different destinations depending on the season depending on the festival. For example, if you were to go during Christmas, I would say many of our churches are mesmerizing. They're very, very old. They're all living churches. And the music at that time is quite something.
Yes, sir. And India is such a big country that one must really plan where to go. It's not distances can be quite huge, and traveling from one point to another really entails a bit of planning, a bit of preparation. It's not like the Philippines where perhaps things are closer together. But in India, just from Delhi, if you fly down to Mumbai, that's already a good maybe 3 hours, sir.
Yeah.
Just to get down to Mumbai. But we're not even talking about the deep south of India.
Yeah, I think if you're doing a India visit,
Yes, sir.
I would actually plan it. And if you're going out of the beaten track, then you should plan even better. Because what's important is to know where to stay. And normally where to stay is not just that you stay in the best hotel. It's where it is physically located, and you can match that with what you want to do. Some people, for example, might want to go and see weavers, or people dealing with textiles and garments, and which is a huge thing in India, And so if you were to stay in a hotel which is about 2 hours drive from this, it's not going to work with what you want.
Yes, sir. Yes,
So I think it's important to have an excellent tour group leader who's able to sit down and plan this. And the tourist offices in Singapore, etc., are more than happy to help, as indeed would be the Indian Embassy.
Yes, sir. And talking about distances and big areas, when we talk about India, it's not a country that one can see in one go. I think one must really have an idea of what one wants to see, and then make that holiday around that idea, around that plan. Would you agree, Mr. Bassett?
Totally agree with you. Totally agree with you. And there are friends of mine who visit India almost once a year.
Yes, sir.
But then they do segments of India. They take India in bits and pieces, and so they focus on a particular thing to do, so to speak. But you need many lifetimes to see India.
Yes, sir. Because even the wildlife aspect, I would think, would require almost an entire vacation in itself.
Yeah, it would.
Just to see several reserves.
I agree.
Yes.
It would.
Yes.
It would.
Now, for visiting India for Filipinos, the Filipinos need visas. How do people go about getting visas and that sort of thing?
Well, I mean, India and Philippines have entered into an agreement which allows you to get a visa on arrival in certain stations. In the Philippines, for an Indian national, it's only in Manila. But in India, there are more than one station that you can get it. And I do hope we liberalize this further and allow more cities to be opened up. Right now, the focus has been on which is the kind of flight a Filipino would normally take to enter India. And so flights may not be reaching Calcutta, so they will look at Delhi, and so restricted number of seats. But yes, you need getting a visa is always a very easy thing. We do it in less than 24 hours at the Indian Embassy, and it's a visa application is online, so that's made it far more streamlined. And I'm looking forward to doubling my figures.
How are your figures? How are your Filipino tourists?
Well, that's a very good question, and I'll tell you the difficulties in my responding to that question. Before we introduced the visa on arrival, I would be able to track anyone who wanted to go to India. Now that whole statistic is taken away from me. And my understanding is that we've issued almost 300 visas on arrival, and on a daily basis we are doing about 150. So that's pretty good.
Are those tourists, sir, 150 or?
Well, I think, what's happened, buddy, is that some people go only on tourism, but others combine business and tourism. So they go on a business visit, then take 2 days off. So the fine line between a tourist visa and a business visa is, I think, getting fuzzy now. I mean, most businessmen would sort of, you won't come to Manila to do work and not go off to Tagaytay or, go and see the waterfall. And so if you go to the waterfall, are you a tourist? You know what I mean?
Yes, sir.
If you go to Intramuros, I mean, what is it? Have you gone for business? No, of course not. But you've completed your work, you've done tourism. So I think it's a combination of the two.
Yes, sir. Anyway, sir, we look forward to helping you double your figures through shows like this and promoting India as a destination.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. So we have to pause for a break now, sir. But guys, don't go away, because in a few moments, more of Incredible India when Philippines Uncut returns.